It's always after the intro, it's hard to speak. It's Rob. Actually, I'm a bird flying solo on Carnival of Randomness today, and I use the bird thing because when is a raven not like a writing desk when it's the archive ravens in the back? Like how he did that?
Yeah.
So it's Tom and Ava's back. We're very glad to have them. And they have a gig at Fringe Fest on September 16th. It's about world music, I take it, and we will talk about that. They also have a gig coming up this week. So we'll talk about that and other interesting stuff. But I have to just bring up quickly again the story. How, it's one of my favorite names and how you got the name.
Sure. So what we really wanted to do was not just write original music, even though that is a centerpiece of our musical mission, but we also really wanted to incorporate music from different cultures and different time periods, because we really feel like that roots music. There's so much, you're always standing on the shoulders of greatness as a musician. You're always digging back into your roots. And so really being able to go to those cultures and trying to, in a deep way, look at what they were doing, try to touch back with that. And how that relates to the name is, of course, archive. You go into an archive and you see everything from the past, and it helps inform the future and planning and stuff like that. And then ravens are a very interesting creature because in mythology, they were often the connection between the celestial world and the earthly world because they feasted on dead animals, basically. And so what ancient people thought was like, oh, they must be that connection between, like the afterlife, the dead, and the living and the world right now. And so they were like basically thought of as like spiritual messengers between the gods in some cultures. And it's like surprising how consistent that is in like Native American cultures and in Norse culture and in even like Indian culture, and like how they've played such an important role as that's like the main thing, that they're such like connecting forces and we want to connect music. But the other thing is that they're shapeshifters, and for me I've always really engaged with that because musically I've always wanted to play around with like bringing in old things and juxtaposing them with new things and saying like, look at what's different but look at what's the same. So that's where the name.
I think in our collective unconsciousness, there's some connections too, because you just go around the world, take every myth and everything. Like you go back to myths of the flood myths, Gilgamesh, or any of these, Osiris, somebody who died and rose from the dead. We all have our shapeshifter, like in Africa, Anatanzi, the trickster myth. The spider, the little spider guy, as best I can call him. But I think we do. Somehow we're all connected in a way, like the way we think in terms of all these. But it's also, too, raven sounds better than turkey vulture, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you say that, I'm thinking about, like, okay, you got pyramids in Egypt and you got pyramids also in the Americas. And it's like, okay, was that from literally the same culture, same idea, people just migrated? Or was it just that collective unconsciousness where it's like, okay, building in this shape is a good thing to do.
Like Easter Island or something,
right.
How any of those. Or like, that's an interesting point, too, and I'm sure people have done studies, like, how do you get, like, an isolated people, but you finally, like, they live on an island or they've never been to civilization or anywhere else, but they just stayed where they were, and you go in and they have all this stuff that we have.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about those island peoples is a lot of them created the same technology in roughly the same amount of time. So even though humans had been around for, like, whatever large span of time, they found that a lot of the technology on those island people made separately. They, of course, never could have interacted. But they came up with the technology at roughly the same time. And it makes me think of, like Carl Jung and the archetypes. That's a lot of that is, like, basically in our subconscious psyche, we have all these things, and even like dreams, and like the vision of a like winged lion and stuff like that is across all cultures that have never interacted. So there's like things that he thinks are basically like set within us, almost like in our like genetic code sort of thing, but they're psychological.
Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell's books, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And also the Golden Bough. Even though in the Golden Bough, George MacDonald Fraser, the one thing you wouldn't want to do when you were an ancient leader is, I guess, because they were so afraid of death and didn't know, like if you got like a tooth fell out or something, they'd murder you. So you were, I feel great today.
What was the Golden Bough?
George MacDonald Fraser. It's about myths, lore, early peoples, the power of myth, and it goes on about early cultures. How if you were because imagine too, you're like among the first people and people die and you really wonder what's happening and that's the whole idea of Gilgamesh, where they were trying to explain, the idea of there's immortality but it got stolen because you didn't know what happened. So that's what that whole book is. It's like 600 pages on ancient civilizations, collective unconsciousness, and everything else. Oh, and Hungin and Mungin.
Yeah. Are those the ravens of
Odin's,
Odin?
Yeah. So I can't even remember people's names anymore. Like I can remember stuff like that. But you like some of your songs. I love like where they come from. I mean, who else does songs? They have like something from physics in them, or.
I really love those too. I mean, I think for me personally, for my songwriting, I keep it pretty simple. I think I do kind of what a lot of singer-songwriters do, get a good little chord progression, write something from the heart. And then Ava over here, she's breaking it down, like how do I make this chord progression as scientific as possible? And also I want to throw in something like a metaphor about physics and the wave function and things like that and relate that to my relationships. And I think...
Yeah, I do that on this show all the time with Greg.
Yeah.
He's like... I'm a drummer. I hit stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, like, there's pros and cons to both methods, and that's why I'm so, like, basically honored to work with Tom, is because the fusion really brings it to this place where, because you want it to be approachable. You want it to be something that people enjoy intuitively. But then for me, like, I know a lot of songwriters, it's really cool they do this. They just kind of, like, sit down and in an afternoon, they write a whole song. And for me, that's like, whoa, that's crazy cool. For me, though, usually where a lot of ideas come from is I'll just be, like, sitting up in bed at night, like, thinking about some weird thing. And I'll be like, oh, the cool thing about music is you can structurally represent stuff like that in a way that isn't literal. And you can take the literal and put it next to music, which, like, represents it in, like, in a way that's more like you intuitively feel the pattern. So
pay attention to your dreams too, because a lot of times they're like stories for you. Like I have like a pen and paper by the bed. Sometimes like you just get up, like, or I'll have because I'll think of an idea. I know when I wake up, I won't remember this. So I got to write it down.
Yeah.
Then I'll write like a couple words. I go, what was I thinking about? Oh. Yeah. But I think that's how, like, creative people create. And I think that's, like, the one thing I've been saying on this show lately. I've decided, like, some people have yelled at me, you're a music snob and everything because I make fun of certain bands. And I say, no, what bothers me about them, this goes way back to a lot of people even I know, is you can like what you like, but they're not willing to even try anything else.
Yeah.
And they have a weird thing where, like, if you don't like their stuff, you're like... but it's like, okay, I'll go to the show, your cover band show. Why don't you just try this? You might like it. And they, oh yeah, we'll go. And they never show up or something, or they don't. Yeah. And I don't get that. We're like, you're like, I like to call it. It's like you're musical explorers. You're looking for everything out there. It's unending, which is great. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think part of that is also tribal with people like getting stuck in their genres. It's almost like people having their like baseball team or football team or whatever, and they're just like, these are my people, and so I don't want to stray from that, and this is where I feel comfortable, and this is where I feel at home. But yeah, for us and like for our name and stuff, we always wanted to be exploring and kind of reaching into our roots in a way that was, like, it's interesting because it is kind of nostalgic, even if it's cultures and times that we've never been to. For me, I've talked to a lot of people who will say things like they'll hear like a Disney Channel song come on and will be like, oh, this is so nostalgic, or what was the other song that
All the Small Things.
All the Small Things. And I saw that on someone's like list for a gig, and I was like, that's a cool song, but I wouldn't really imagine like wanting to cover it necessarily. And they were like, oh, but it's really nostalgic. And it's interesting for me, like, I'm not necessarily nostalgic for that time. Like, realistically, like, I'm not really nostalgic for like my high school time, like what a lot of people are nostalgic for. Maybe because I wasn't engaged with pop culture very well, like, which is bad because it always seems like you're under a rock.
I've always said if people ask you if people go, when were the best days of your life, and you're saying that, I think it's sad, like high school or something. It's like you're looking at rose-colored glasses. The best time of your life should be now. Looking at the future, and like those times weren't that great. It's like you think the 50s were great for some people. Yeah, there's some people. And I think about that. Even like I think about like I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things with certain friends in the 50s. But I also think the idea too of the song music. It's like a universal way to communicate. Think about we were talking about like at your show about Homer. And you had your Penelope reference, which made me think of Ulysses, unfortunately, not the Odyssey. I say that because it took me 3 weeks to read. It was a pain.
Yeah. She's called Penelope in the Odyssey, though, right?
Oh yeah, she's Penelope.
Yeah.
Oh, and Ulysses too. Yeah,
And both of them. Yeah.
But that's all that is. But remember we were saying, like, if you really read Homer or any of these others, you're wondering, why is all this flowery words, like, why the mighty, the bold Ajax? Because why he was singing it, he was like lyric poeming it to people.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, like, your gigs or whatever you play, like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours? You imagine, okay, now we have to do a poem for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Well, it's impressive, right? It's years and years of constant practice, and that's all he did. That was his profession.
He's blind too.
Yeah, he didn't. It's not like he didn't go out and work
a blind
the land.
poet.
He would wake up every day and he'd work the poems.
That's intriguing, though, like that, how they do that.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, like, you were talking about, how do you sort of pick your covers? Because I know you were talking a little about Diamonds and Rust, which I think was really good myself. So.
I love that song.
We have a few.
How do we pick our covers? That's a good question.
No, because they're like out of the ballpark. Like when you started with that, I'm thinking, okay, here's another one that I never expected that.
Yeah, well, it is kind of random, if I'm going to be honest. Like, it is, for covers, I think we just try to catch the what is the word I'm looking for? Like, the momentum of, like, oh, I just heard this cool version of this song. Like, let's do that and try to get that energy.
It really depends. Sometimes we have just different songs that we really like that, again, are unique, and maybe we want to expand the different genres that we tap into. But also, for that song specifically, it was actually my Uncle John would always ask for it. He kept seeing us, and he loves us, and he's like, oh, do you guys know any Joan Baez? Play Diamonds and Rust. And after hearing it 4 or 5 times, I was like, maybe we should learn that Diamonds and Rust song.
Yeah.
You didn't play the Judas Priest version.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I ever heard it was Judas Priest, and I read that they did Diamonds and Rust. Then I found it was Joan Baez. And it basically is like a complaint song about somebody.
Yeah.
But that's how, some people, you take it personally or just write that stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's the one thing I want to talk about a lot is you are having a show at Fringe Fest coming up. And now this is more focusing on your international music. Or would you prefer world music?
Yeah, I don't know. I just call world music. I don't really know what to call music a lot of times. Just go with whatever seems right.
Music, but, like I had a friend on recently who didn't like the term art, and I'm like, it's just whatever you do. It's like generic. I just use music because we're not playing tiddlywinks. We're talking about music, I guess.
So for this show, it's called Folk Music from Around the World, and it's actually a project that we started with Brendan Caroselli. Well, Brendan Caroselli and Ava started it, basically to pursue different folk songs that were important in different cultures, deeply rooted in other cultures, that they just thought were really interesting, and to get that influence of different styles of music. So we've expanded the repertoire, and we'll be performing a show of all these different songs from different cultures. Yeah.
Kudos on sort of pronunciations with all the...
Yeah. Realistically, I mean, I'd love to say I'm working with specialists from all these different countries, but realistically it's kind of a fake it till you make it. And as vocalists, like both Tom and I like singing in other languages because it just opens up your world to all these other possibilities, because as a vocalist, just the melodic line is not your only medium of expression, also vowels and consonants and how they interact. And so in English you have a set of those that interact specifically, but you don't have in all these other languages. You have other things, other possibilities, and each language has its weird peculiarities, and trying to engage with that is really exciting. Like German's got its own feel, French has its own feel. It physically feels different. And we're learning. Well, I'm learning a lot of new languages for this show, and I'm doing my very best with them, like listening to native singers sing them. But also at the end of the day, it is kind of an approximation, because we don't necessarily have like the funds and stuff to hire tutors to come in and nitpick our pronunciation. So we're kind of like, we're approximating it in like as in a way that we are being like as faithful to it as we can, like honoring it as much as we can, but not worrying if it's perfectly perfect.
I would say too, and I might be totally wrong, I think maybe more importantly is you just have to understand the background and the meaning of the song. So I think the big thing with music, there's, okay, I don't know what the heck you're saying.
Right.
Okay, I do know like 25 languages, and I'm lying, it's my show, leave me alone. But no, I think you understand, like say like, okay, this song's about he's just lost something, and we're conveying it through music.
Right.
You feel the emotion, and you just see the way they're singing the sorrowfulness,
Mm-hmm.
and you have no idea what the words are, but, they're universal. We have so many universal themes, and I think that's what plays out.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because different languages actually like capture thought in different ways too. Like even if you're just looking how they order words differently in sentences, or they have different words. Like in German, you have a lot of words that are like squished together that are all make one word. Like my favorite one is like Abendrot, which is evening red, which is like it's like sunset, like that sunset color, but it's also like the evening. It's also like the ending. It's this really beautiful terms, like stuff like that we just don't have in English, and so there's so many more possibilities linguistically that opens up all these different thoughts. But as you said, so much of it is universal. But I agree with you, and that's why we're kind of okay with it not being maybe necessarily perfect linguistically, because as long as you're honoring the culture and honoring the language.
Yeah, and you explain a little bit what the song's about and what
Yeah.
you're trying to achieve in them too, so people have an idea. And I think that's really good too, because then people can, like the way you're like sort of doing, like the way your tone is and the music and everything else. Mm-hmm. One thing I found out though during the great COVID lockdown, I have tons of international music, so I started playing it all the time. And I also just love like the different instruments and everything. And
Yeah, that's definitely something that I wish we were tapping more into, but at a certain point, it's like, again, money. Like, you go buy, it's called a ney, right? The kind of Arabic flute that you hear and all those things. It's like, okay, well, probably not going to start dropping money on that. But if you do, it makes the show so much more interesting, Like, you get a unique instrument, and suddenly you could do something so simple, but people are hearing that new sound, that new timbre, and it draws them in, and it brings them to that culture. So trying to get a good balance of that, but I mean at the same time, for the ney, I'm playing clarinet instead, so things like that.
It was also too. Now I forgot. I actually knew it at your show at Daily Refresher. Now I forgot it was the Bulgarian instrument.
Yeah.
Now I forgot what it was.
I would remember.
Yeah, the one that sounds like a bagpipe.
Yep, it's like a Bulgarian bagpipe.
Yeah,
but it's fascinating to see it on stage too. I saw my friend Leah play. She's a people player. That's just a Chinese lute. But she had a friend come on and brought this instrument, and it's the national instrument of Sweden. Basically, it looks like a platypus, and I can't.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah, it does. It just the visual of it. And the first thing I said is, "You have a CD? I have to hear this thing."
Yeah.
But there's so many out there, like all the weird instruments and everything too, and all the different sounds you get in there too.
Yeah.
It's not just like your one guitar and like your one metal riff or anything else.
It's funny, our friend Brendan, who we're doing the show with, actually has a really cool collection of instruments from around the world. Like, he has a guzheng, which is, I think, originally from China. It's like kind of like a Chinese mandolin. And he has a couple of Indonesian ballophones, and he even made a ballophone himself. And he has
Indonesian?
I think it's Indonesian.
Oh, I thought those were African.
I think the ones that he has are Indonesian, but I think that he was saying that there's some African connection and like the trade routes between them, like they developed it was kind of, I think, like we were talking about before, I think they kind of like developed them simultaneously, and because there was like these trade routes between them. But anyways, the one that I'm really jealous of is he has a oud. I'm totally saying it wrong, I'm sorry. I have a friend
Nobody's
from Saudi.
gonna know.
One of my best friends from college is from Saudi Arabia, and so I would say the name of that instrument, which requires a guttural O, which as an English speaker I can't really wrap my mind around. But anyways, that's kind of like a guitar, but it's from that region, like from the Middle East. It actually predated the guitar, but he has one of those, and I'm so jealous because I wanted one, but again, don't necessarily have the money to get one. But yeah, that's such a beautiful instrument too, because there's a lot of similarities with guitar, but it's really like a philosopher's instrument. And one of my, it really is like, that's what I think of it. Well, that's kind of what people would say about it, because just like, it's interesting just because it's like melodic, like mannerisms. It's very like you're picking it more than you're strumming it. With the guitar you can strum, but with a oud you're more doing this picking pattern. And a lot of like the Arabic maqams, like it's more of like a stream of thought, like a literal stream of thought, maybe potentially. That's kind of how I interpret it.
That would be really interesting to look at. It's something I've never even really thought about, like the development of music all around the world. Why they would go for such instruments? Is it like, you think in a way practicality, maybe that's what they had on hand, like they had these type of tools or this type of like wood or something there that they could make this. Because it's something I've really never thought of where they've come from. Like you go to Jamaica, you hear the reggae in the woods and everything. Why? Because maybe because they were poor, they started banging on drums, like banging on garbage cans even, like something.
I think that there's two elements to it. I think there's the one element which was described in a lot of like the Tuvan throat singing, where they're trying to imitate nature. I think there's a lot of that in music, especially the older primordial music, if you want to call it that, with singing and with different percussion instruments, just trying to imitate the sounds of nature. But I think then there's also this rhythmic element to it and this pulse, like this heartbeat that everybody feels. And I think that's where a lot of the percussion comes from, where I don't know. You think about like how they come up with that. They're just like, okay, what if we stretch the skin over this like hollow log and then hit it and it makes a really cool noise, and then I can hit it in this beat and now we can dance to it.
It's one of my little beefs now. Yes, it's like Deus Ex Machina for movies and stuff now. You can get anything. But I think it's missing an element of creativity when you didn't have that. And you had to like think about like Ray Harryhausen where you have to move the thing every second. Or like I need an effect, so somebody needs a laser beam. They whack like a telephone wire like outside to get the ping.
Yeah.
And I think there's more fun like that in a way because you have to be creative.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes me think of the original Star Wars. I mean, there's just a video I saw that was talking about it, but with the original one, they didn't have the CGI, so they had to be very innovative with their special effects and all the special effects back in the day before CGI. But nowadays, they just slap CGI on it. It's almost a little bit lower quality because they're not putting so much heart into it.
I watch some of these movies and I go, yeah, it's neat, but there's no creativity. They all look like the same stuff and everything.
Right.
But I also think the idea of music builds on stuff, because look at like rock and roll. It was like the blues, the spirituals. They were slaves in the field trying to get through the horrible days they had singing these things. That's where like all like rock and roll comes from.
Yeah.
And everything else.
And the other cool thing about that, kind of like we were talking about before, different cultures having their own rhythms and stuff. The cool thing about like blues and that history is a lot of that came when trains were widespread, so you can hear the influence of just actually modes of travel. I always think when I'm listening to music that's like Middle Eastern, I can always hear that like three sort of thing of camel steps. That's like what I often will hear when I hear like music from that region, so you can like hear their modes of transportation, and then also like their like linguistic what's the word, cadence. And I think like a lot of that is reflected in the rhythms.
I think there's a term we took the eastbound train or whatever, which means they died like hobos, because there's like supposedly like legendary hobo convention, but they would say that when somebody died they took that train and everything like that. But I was wondering too, like what parts of the world are we going to hear there? And are you going to be cooking dishes from each of them? What are we going around the world
at the
this
show?
time? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's going to be Armenian songs. A couple of those is a song from Japan, Brazilian tune, a song in Portuguese, Malian tune. Actually, the Malian tune's not specifically like a deeply rooted folk culture song, but it's a really nice song, has a really nice message that I just love, and it's a very folky sound. That Malian, like West African guitar style is really cool. So they'll mix like blues and pentatonic scale and also this kind of Arabic feel into the music and mix that all together. It's really unique.
I've lucked out. There was some show on 91.5 that had some of those bands on. Stuff's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
Malian, that's really, where do you find this stuff?
Honestly, that one was I just stumbled upon it and I was like, this needs to be in the show.
A lot of them is just stumbling across them on YouTube, finding a good video and then looking what YouTube recommends and then saying, oh, I like this artist, what else have they done? And that's a lot of it's kind of
you
dumb
want a
luck.
funny one? There's that monk that plays like metal songs on his gongs.
What?
And he plays like Judas Priest and the Ramones, and he's just banging a gong on a big drum. But there's one band I think you'd really like. I've seen, they became a favorite immediately, a band called Daka Braka.
Daka Braka.
I've heard the name, but I don't think I've
played
ever
at Hochstein a lot. They're one of Mona's favorite, my friend from
local.
They're not local. They're from Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
But what they do is like they play the drums, but the one person, he does like bird calls. He's got like all these different types of bird calls and noises he does with his voice. They're lots of fun. And I'll send you a video of them afterwards. They're just, I've seen them. I took one of my friends, and I just asked her, "How is this?" After 4 songs, she says, "This is amazing."
Wow.
Yeah.
You know,
Braga.
yeah, they're great. Plus, they were really awesome. Big hats.
Oh, yeah.
I do love when you get to see their traditional costumes.
They dress
too.
traditionally.
One of the songs that we're doing, it just has a really amazing music video with it. It's from Mongolia, and the ladies in particular, they're in these really cool outfits, and they're doing these subtle dances. You know, it's nothing like flashy, but it's so classy. It's so cool, and in their outfits, it's just like it's so cool to see that with the music. Unfortunately, we don't, again, have all these traditional outfits that we can wear, but I really do love seeing them.
Well, Spirit Halloween's open, I think.
Yeah.
I get, like, I'll get fixated. Like, I was fixated on Mongolia for a while, and the reason was nobody ever talks about it. Mm-hmm. But I got into, again, during COVID, I was finally going through books. I got into a lot of, like ghost mythology around the world, and you find Mongolia is very haunted. Like, actually, Japan's like probably one of the most haunted countries in terms of their myths and everything. They have a ritual they do on Halloween. You walk by a house, they'll get 30 people or so, they'll put a candle up. You speak and you blow it out, then they blow the last candle out.
Wow.
Goodness.
And it's like very haunted. Like, and I don't know why you just don't think of like Japan as like it's so very. Just the ghost myths and everything are fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're playing next week. Mm-hmm. This week actually. This is
This Friday we're playing at Mendon 64. It's really nice because I grew up in Mendon, like that's so it feels like our stomping ground at this point because we play there every month. We used to play there every second Saturday, but now we're switching actually to first Fridays starting in October. From 5:30 to 7:30, the first Friday of every month. And yeah, I really love that place. It's really, again, like I just used classy, but it is really classy. It's like really cozy. They got great food and everything. And they're such supporters of original music. Most of the venues that we play, they say, "Hey, can you try to keep the originals to a minimum? Please try to, play the Beatles and play Elton John." We love that. Yeah, and we love that. But it's really cool to have a venue that says, "Hey, can you try to play as much of your original music as possible?" Yeah,
okay, please,
really cool.
No, please. Unless you have to. Don't do Jolene, just because I have 7 friends who are doing it. And it's a lovely song, but now when I hear it, I start laughing with friends. It's like, Dolly's done a lot of other stuff.
That's so funny.
It's funny because we do
the one
Jolene.
song that like everyone plays.
But it's funny because some people will say, "Oh, please do Jolene. I love when you do Jolene," and then other people will be like, "Oh my God, everyone does Jolene. Please don't do Jolene."
You know what I do now?
So we were just trying to
actually,
navigate that.
One of my friends that I won't mention, I said, you play Jolene too, so I hate that song.
It's so funny.
I don't know, some people just want, that's what I say, it's sad to me, but some people just want the familiar.
Well, there is actually, I mean, from my...
That's nothing wrong with it, but also it's like...
So as a performer, as a songwriter, of course, you want to do your original stuff, but as a performer and if you have like a somewhat strange voice, you also not that I have a strange voice, but you almost want to introduce people to your voice in a way that they know. You have to like navigate the familiar with the unfamiliar. So sometimes it's like a good entry point to be like, here's a song that you know and love, but here's our little spin on it, and it introduces you to us. But sometimes throwing, because our music can sometimes be like distinct.
No, I was going to say, you go an archive radio show, you get a little bit of everything. You get your music, you get world music, you get a little bit of jazz. It's like, that's what I say. It's like a beautiful cornucopia of sound.
Oh, thank you.
I started that on the spot. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that was really nice. But sometimes
I tell friends of mine,
I
say you're not going to see another band like this. They're unique, and you're really going to enjoy it. You'll even get Ave Maria.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I love that song.
That was a treat. So actually, what Rob's talking about at our last show, our friend who we just met at the climbing gym. So we met her actually only one time before at the climbing gym, and she overheard us talking about practice and was like, "Oh, I'm a musician." And so we let her know that we were playing at the little cafe.
That was awesome.
And she actually came right from her gig, so she had her cello with her. And we said, "Hey, you want to jump up here and play cello with us?" And so she played cello on Schubert's Ave Maria with us, and it was just the coolest experience.
Yeah, that never happens on this show. We don't have like a random cello player walk down the hall. And you did pretty good singing that last song too, Tom.
Oh, Tommy!
know you were a little like, no, I didn't, but you were fine.
Oh, it was
There's
Remember,
just
I was up front. I didn't throw my keys at you or anything.
Yeah, I'm still working on the German leader, but I got pretty close there.
We actually did one. My friend's band, the Badnoffs. We did the one album. And it's called "Follow the Leader." Leader, L-I-E. You know what that follow the song?
Yeah.
We were pretentious.
No,
I like
love
that though.
Well, I mean, it's also interesting, too, because a lot of people appreciate that we're doing a lot of things, but in certain styles, like in classical music and in art song, I mean, if I had specifically gone to, like, music school, they probably wouldn't have let me sing all these styles. Like, if you're trying to do classical music, you're not really supposed to sing the other styles because it'll, like, kind of corrupt your voice a little bit, and there's actually some physical truth to that, where it's sometimes confusing for your voice to switch between styles, and that's something I'm trying to navigate. But it's interesting because you can devote your whole life to just studying leader and still not, like, that's still not enough. And yet here we are trying to sing all these different styles.
There is an interesting, you know what you should do sometime? If you know anybody from that country who speaks the language, see what they think of your interpretation. Mm-hmm. And I say this because a friend of mine, I got him Tom Waits' Alice CD, and he sings the one song in German. And my friend said after, it's like, his German's really bad.
Yeah.
And actually a friend of mine right from England, that movie, The Iron Lady, when it came out with Meryl Streep as Margaret Thatcher, she said that accent's just not right.
Yeah.
For us, we hear it. So that would be interesting, like if you had somebody, okay, how did this sound?
Yeah, my friend...
Don't ruin my life in hopes by...
I know, that's what I'm... See, my friend from Saudi Arabia, I'm like, I should have run this, one of the song that's in Arabic, through with him, but then... I don't know. It's tough. And I probably will.
I will say my own thing. I'm not that good with languages, but I knew a little French. So, like, Paris is a different bird in terms of, like, you don't want to do this in Paris. But if you're in other parts of France or Quebec, if you make an effort, like when I was in Russia, I would make an effort. Mm-hmm. And part of it was because I got disgusted with some tourists who were, like, pure ugly Americans. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm in your country. I want to show you respect. And it probably said, like, serve me a boot and shove it down my throat. Something. But they appreciate it that you try.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like about, like, in America, too. It's like, speak the language. Well, tough. You think it's easy to learn the language.
Yeah. And in Europe, they're often quite strict about, like, dialect and stuff like that.
Well, I got to Helsinki. I'm in Russia and in Poland. And actually in Poland, more people who spoke English. But in Russia, it would be... almost it's like trying to communicate with people, like that. But like when Helsinki, English is one of the official languages. So when I got there, most people knew it. But I was going to say, mentioning Elton John, I don't like to do top tens, but I'm all over for music. His concert I went to years ago was probably like in the top 5 best.
Yeah,
I
love Elton John,
and I love his. I'm actually getting more into his early 70s, but I have to break this one to you because I've been breaking it to a couple of friends. I finally found out what Benny and the Jets is about.
Yeah. Oh, what?
Would you know?
No.
It's about snorting cocaine with a $100 bill. Whew. Think about it. 70s Benny Benjamin.
Oh, dear.
Wow.
Benjamin Franklin. But the worst part was, I'm thinking, okay, he was on the Muppet Show. Can you imagine, like, he's singing that on the Muppet Show? Well, Animal probably did cocaine. The drummer.
Yeah, it's...
But especially his 70s stuff, and I say, like, if you like alternative country bands like the Jayhawks, that keyboards that he does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the Jayhawks.
No, they're really low. They're one of my favorite alternative, sort of like an alternative country, but like that type of keyboard for a lot of alt country for their keyboards, it's Elton John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe people get it because he wore like the funny duck costumes and stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that we've talked about a little bit before.
You're not going to wear a duck costume, are you, Tom? No.
I'm just thinking about the lyrics of Benny and the Jets. What?
Hey, kid. One of my friends has been covering it. She's covered Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So I said, we were talking after she played it, and I'm like, I've never known what that song's about. Is it about a band, maybe? Benny. So I went and I looked it up, and I always go multiple sources because you never know. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my! So I text her, go, you know what you're singing?
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
Yeah, go through the lyrics. Hey,
it's a great song.
Yeah, it is though. But it's like we'll kill the cat fast coming round. But then there'll be electric. So you're probably at a concert, probably in the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's a lot of music written about that sort of thing.
Especially in the 70s, too. I think in the 70s were quite indulgent.
Yeah.
I think the 60s were. The 70s were a little more... They were the era of the Keith Richards Death Watch.
Yeah. It's funny because we kind of steer clear of a lot of stuff having to do with intoxicants, just because we're trying to play like more high-end places realistically, you know what I mean? We don't want to be like disrespectful.
Yeah, I don't even drink anymore or anything.
Yeah.
Well, unless it's like, it's like sometimes like my mom, when I was a kid, and I was a big Velvet Underground fan, I would play Venus in Furs incessantly, which is about the old book about, it's a S&M book by, and my mom is singing the lyrics, and I'm going, you know what the song is about.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to a Marquis de Sade book, and Severin's like the servant, and it's all about like, naughty stuff.
Yeah.
That band's great though, Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think John Cale's version of Venus and Furs is even better, though, if you could find. He plays it with violin. But I'm just thinking about some people just don't get that because, you know why? They get the rhythm. And they don't understand. But you could stay. I've never heard of either of you write a nasty intoxicant song.
Yeah, it's just like you have to be a little careful with where and when you're playing those, and so we kind of steer clear of that a little bit. We actually once had a friend who came and played for us at Mendon 64, which is like kind of a high-end place, and he did a song that had a bunch of like swear words in it, and I was kind of there, like my face gone white. And
It's
I was
not like
oh,
high-end, but it's definitely like a decent establishment, and he comes and starts dropping the F-bomb multiple times in the song.
I mean, you
like,
can't swear on the podcast, but I'm being highbrow this week.
Yeah.
But we had one of my friends, they played a gig for New Year's Eve at German House, right? And they do a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff, but they could be really raunchy. Mm-hmm. And they didn't realize there's an older crowd, and like 8 people walked out.
Yeah, definitely.
And one of my friends played like an early show, and she starts swearing up on stage. And then she's looking around. There's all these little kids.
For sure.
It's just, it's in general, to me, not worth it, because usually what it provides aesthetically is not much. And so it's like, might as well, unless like, I think there's definitely instances where it like adds some punch and stuff like that.
If you use one word right.
Yeah.
That's like when we can talk about comic books or pro wrestling on here, we could swear our heads off for this one. But I want to also bring up, this is awesome. Your Into the Celestial's been remastered.
Yeah.
It's also, can you tell us a little about why you decided to do that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because as a like, so we're not only, we're writing the songs, we're performing the songs, and we're like kind of the business managers behind it, the producers behind it, wearing a lot of hats.
You do your own stuff, too. I got the last like pink bag too.
Yeah,
but
we
don't
make
you
our own
sew all this?
Too. I don't sew it actually, but I do like the vinyl stuff. I'm learning how to screen print right now. But for Into the Celestial, a lot of the reason. So, mainly it's because I wanted to re-record my vocals. Because when we were recording it, there's so much hustle and bustle of being in the studio and trying to produce it all and trying to make sure things are going on time and everyone's getting their parts right. And for me, when I'm recording my vocals, I honestly love to be alone. I like it, in the morning, and my favorite time of day. I like to be calm. I like to do it on my own, and that's when I think I really get the best product. And I felt like in that situation where there was so much hustle and bustle, I don't think that the vocal performance that I initially gave necessarily served the songs the way I wanted to. And so, we put so much work into the first version, but I was thinking, I really care about these songs, and I really want to take them to that level that they deserve to be at. And if that requires fixing it this year, and if that requires even fixing it in the future, it's like, at a certain point, like, you wonder if it's perfectionism, and it's like, oh, you just keep diddling and diddling. But you also have to say, like, no, like, you have to know when it's worth it to keep pressing forward until you really feel like, okay, in your gut, you really feel that this is the way it should be. And the vocals in this version that we just re-released, I think are much more appropriate for the songs, and I'm much more proud of them, and I think they're much more representative of what we wanted to say. So it kind of was like a big to-do in order to just redo that, and maybe some people think that's like overboard or something, but thank goodness we have this amazing guy named Cole that we work with, and I was like, Cole, you know how we spent those bajillion hours working on that thing? Hey, let me throw you a new thing, and we can like kind of start, like take it back a bunch of steps and have to redo a bunch of stuff. But we're so lucky to work with him, because he was like, you know what, I just want to make the best thing too. And it's always like, he's so positive, he's always giving this great energy and always just wants to make the best thing possible.
And I love, like, I think I always love like I've always had like an intellectual curiosity about things. I like how things to see some behind the scenes. I love like the liner notes to hear like where they came from and the ideas and everything else, which is really fun. I like to hear origins of where things came from. And you don't have like your little "I love you dearly" songs too. You always have like the awesome titles and names of these. And of course, I said like Fata Morgana, that supposedly, if it's right, you could see it on Lake Ontario. Now I never have.
I've never seen.
But I guess like the weather. And this is, for anybody who doesn't know, Fata Morgana is like when you think you see like land or something. Is it? It's like, is that sort of right?
Yeah, land, or like sometimes people see like kind of spirals coming out of the water, but also people have seen like inverted images, so it'll almost look like there's like boats in the air. That's where the whole like Flying Dutchman thing came about, where it'll almost look like there's a whole like moving crew in a boat, and it'll be like, whoa, like that boat with an entire alive crew is in the sky, but it'll just be like some weird reflection off of some different place that's caused by like basically like
one time walking my dog in the woods, I thought I saw a little troll.
Yeah.
I did, and I just keep looking. I see like the little hat, the bell.
Did you see some mushrooms, Rob? Did you see some mushrooms instead?
Okay, this was like back in my 20s. We would have known. That's why there were all those UFO sightings in the 60s. Yeah. So I'm looking. Now, the one thing I got up is like my dog wasn't barking or anything, right? You know, your dog barks, to get out of the woods, or it's like the, Blair Witch or something. But sometimes, what is that?
Yeah.
Then you get your hopes. Is he going to give me something? Yeah. You get up. I got up. It was the way the light hit, like it was around autumn. It was the way the light hit the colors of the leaves just perfectly, like along a tree.
That's cool. So interesting. It's one of those things I bet you couldn't even capture with a picture.
Or if you got that to be like, what's the smudge? Or if you want to go the other way, my friend, the famous tale of Frosty the Carjacker, where one of my friends, Philly, my good friend Kim, she had to work 36 hours straight. And she was walking home and it's all snowy. She thought she saw a snowman come to life.
Oh, no.
Probably because then you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
But now I don't know if I subscribe to this because I've really never studied the evolution of human intelligence. But they were saying, like the Greeks, they actually couldn't distinguish between dreams and reality, so they thought they saw the gods and stuff. Now, I don't know, like, I have to study, like, I've read a lot of Martin Gardner, and he'd probably touch on that somewhere, but I don't know if human intelligence, how far advanced we were, like, if you wouldn't know or not.
I don't think it's really changed that much since back in that day. Pretty sure it's like the same thing, just technology's improved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, who's to say that what we experience in dreams is less valid? Like, I think both Tom and I get some really vivid dreams, and I think a lot of people that are somewhat creative do, and it feels so alive, and it's also like a part of your psyche in a way, as much as like you're not physically going through that. If you are psychologically, who's to say that's not like
I
valid,
agree with that
maybe?
Too, because I get some, I call them cinematic, or like even like I'll be like dead friends or whatever. But you're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to do Stevie Nicks if you keep talking about dreams.
Yeah.
Actually, I have so many people who do that song too.
I know.
I love Stevie, but
yeah, Stevie's great. But yeah, I mean that's definitely.
And also, remember your backgrounds are more like in physics and everything, aren't they?
Yeah, my
bit
degree was in physics.
Like you bring a different background, like for physics and everything, and not like all music or lit or anything else. And I think that relates to music though, because I think like science and that's like it's very like music's the same way. It's structured like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, why I took physics was because for me it was basically like my like philosophy and spirituality. All these other kids in class are sitting there being like, how can I get a job at Lockheed Martin? And I was like, wow, like harmonics, like this is, to me it was
the
like
music
this
of the spheres.
Yeah, it's really all so much, a lot of it is really just trigonometry and and how you're looking at like.
And it's also, I think you talk
sine,
about Into the
cosine.
Celestial, it's like that grand question about like how did this all start? What is there? What's afterwards? It's all in there somewhere. Which I think, and I've always said I wish I'd be around. I probably won't be when we're like able to like go on other planets and stuff. But like the stuff coming back from the James Webb thing.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I think that's really great.
Absolutely. Space is fascinating.
Yeah, and that ties back to the Raven thing, because like the being free across space and time being a continuum, and music itself being a manipulation of space and time, and like our exploration of time rhythmically and of space, like melodically and harmonically, because like the different wavelengths, which is like this different spaces, the different disruption of the air. that's like what creates the different pitches, and their relationships have these fixed intrinsic values that are hierarchical, and they interact with each other in ways that we understand. Like they absolutely are just mathematical. Like
I've
it comes
gotten
back
into
to
a
like
lot
the
of
circle.
that.
Yeah.
Like one of my friends was talking about like time, like his girlfriend's parents. She sees them like the last 2 years. No, you're not really seeing somebody for 2 years. I was thinking of like some friends. Like, okay, how many times do I see them? So how many times am I actually ever going to see them again? Getting into all that. Oh, and I will say too, the Ravens were the Kinks' first name, the band the Kinks.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's pretty cool.
Which your Kinks, the Kinks too, so that's
Yeah, I
very
mean,
glad.
I wouldn't say I really like know much, but I definitely know all the Kinks I've heard.
Sometime, it's like when I was your age and everything, we had to walk to school and 8 feet of snow and stuff. That's when they were around.
Yeah.
But it's always awesome having you in. We can actually talk like really cool stuff and everything.
Yeah, I mean,
now,
even when I see you outside the podcast, I feel like we could just go on talking for so.
Yeah, we can. That's the beauty. It's awesome. But it's great you came down. Now you have a website, right?
We do.
You have a mailing list, which I think actually, after I signed up for it, I think I'm actually on it already. But won't
Maybe.
hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
But cool. Like, just go to, is it Archive Ravens?
Yeah, thearchiveravens.com.
Thearchiveravens.com. Yeah, on there you'll see we have a little rep list. We have booking. If you scroll down the bottom, you can subscribe, get on the mail list, which we just send out to tell people about our shows. So yeah.
And I actually had a little beef because I missed a friend's show last week. And I said, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
And I think, okay, with social media and so, there's a lot of downsides of it, obviously, but I do it for this show and to keep in touch with people. It makes it so much easier. Like, look, I'm never going to complain if you invite me to a show. I want to know what's going on. Get the word out.
Yeah,
Right.
Sure. But then sometimes the social media will try to bury it unless you pay them to show it to people, and so it gets like, Oh,
I know. It's always like that. And also, I guarantee you go see one of their shows, you'll be hooked. And it will be an experience. It'll be different than any other show. That's what I say. There's some bands like you, the Mighty High and Dry, where I just say, okay, subscribe to their music. Well, they do a little bit, but look, it's just good music, okay? And my friends are open-minded. You're really going to like it. And we have an extra treat today, which means I'm not going to be talking anymore. Stop the clapping. But they're going to actually play a song for us, which I'm very thrilled about. Would you just like to say what you're playing?
Yeah, I think we're going to play a song called Aknare Nare, and that's going to be an Armenian song that we'll also be playing in our Fringe Fest show on September 16th. And it's about a beautiful woman whose name is Nare, and the lyrics are all in Armenian, but it basically describes her beauty and how she steals the hearts of thousands, and she's floating around the mountain like a majestic deer and things like that. Very, very beautiful, poetic.
So. Sounds awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. Ava, thanks a heck of a lot. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, cool.
Tatstachki, du Tesia, Siromuras, Hainare Nare, Gigares Vare, Imsirat Yara, Minuchare, Hainare Nare, Gigares Vare, Imsirat Yara.